My name is Ava Mitchell. I'm 29, a graphic designer who was sure I'd found the one in Liam Sterling. Our backgrounds were worlds apart, but after 2 years, I was over the moon when he popped the question. That all changed at our engagement dinner. His father flat out called me a gold digger, and Liam, he just laughed. In that single, shattering moment, everything became crystal clear. I slowly pulled the 2-carat diamond off my finger, set it down next to his dinner plate, and walked out without saying a single word. If you've ever been in a position where you had to be your own hero because the person who should have had your back let you down, I want to hear about it. Drop your story in the comments, hit that subscribe button, and let me know where you're watching from. I'm about to tell you how I learned my self-worth was one thing that was absolutely not up for negotiation. I grew up in Portland with my mom, a rock star of a middle school English teacher, who raised me solo after my dad bailed when I was 4. We never had much money, but we were rich in values. Mom taught me to be fiercely independent and to work my tail off, and that became the core of who I am. Your worth isn't in what you have, it's in what you build, she'd say, grading papers until the wee hours of the morning. That was my gospel. I put myself through design school by juggling 3 jobs: morning barista, evening restaurant hostess, and a weekend graphic design internship. My nights were a blur of 2 a.m. deadlines fueled by cheap coffee and pure grit. While my classmates were complaining about finals and planning their spring break trips, I was working through every holiday to make tuition. After I graduated, I landed a junior designer gig at Henderson Design. I was barely making enough to cover the rent on my shoebox studio apartment, living on a steady diet of ramen noodles and raw ambition. I poured every ounce of myself into my portfolio. Every project was a stepping stone, every client a brick in the foundation of my career. By the time I was 27, I had clawed my way up to senior designer. I earned my stripes with talent and sheer tenacity, not because of a fancy last name or family connections. The week before I met Liam, I had just landed the Meridian account, a huge athletic apparel brand that was about to put our little boutique agency on the map. My boss, Jessica, had put her faith in me to lead the pitch. When we won, the whole office erupted. That win was sweeter than anything that could have been handed to me. I had earned it with late nights, creative gambles, and an absolute refusal to quit even when our first few concepts were shot down. I met Liam at the annual Arts Alliance fundraiser. I'd volunteered to design all the promotional materials for the event. He came up to me during the reception, a glass of champagne in his hand, and started asking about the graphics. I figured he was just another rich donor making polite chit-chat, but then he stayed by my side for the rest of the evening, genuinely fascinated by my design process. Most people just see the final product, Liam remarked, studying the program I'd designed. They don't have a clue about the 100 tiny decisions that went into making it what it is. There was something in the way he said that he saw the effort, the invisible work. When he asked for my number, I paused. The perfectly tailored suit, the family name the Sterlings practically owned downtown, it all screamed that he was out of my league. But there was a kindness in his eyes and a genuine curiosity in his questions. For the first time, I decided to ignore that nagging little voice that warned me about guys born with a silver spoon in their mouth. I expected our first date to be at some stuffy exclusive restaurant, but he took me to a tiny hole-in-the-wall ramen joint I'd mentioned I loved. He did, however, pull up in a car that cost more than I made in a year. When I gave him a hard time about it, he just laughed. "My dad's in the car business," he said casually. I found out later that "in the car business" meant his family owned the biggest chain of luxury car dealerships in 3 states. Despite our wildly different upbringings, we talked for hours. Liam was smart, inquisitive, and surprisingly grounded for a guy who'd never had to worry about rent. He was passionate about art, loved hiking the trails of the Pacific Northwest, and could talk for hours about obscure movies. Sure, he'd sometimes say things that revealed just how privileged his life was. "Doesn't everyone summer in the Hamptons?" But he always seemed genuinely embarrassed when I called him out on it. Our bond deepened over the next few months. Liam came to my agency's holiday party and completely won over my coworkers without being flashy or arrogant. He'd listen with such focus when I'd talk about my design ideas, offering thoughtful feedback that showed he truly valued what I did. When I landed a huge campaign, he showed up at my door with a bottle of champagne, celebrating my success, as if it were the biggest deal in the world. I fell for the way his eyes would crinkle up when he laughed, the way he remembered the smallest details about my friends, and how patient he was when he taught me how to ski after I confessed I'd never been. He seemed to genuinely love my straightforwardness, my drive, and the fact that I couldn't care less about his family's name or their money. 14 months in, Liam asked me to move in with him. We found this cool, modern apartment downtown. It was pricier than anything I would have picked on my own, but we figured out a system. I paid what I could comfortably afford for rent, and Liam covered the rest, never once making me feel like I was contributing less. My small circle of friends adored Liam. Even my best friend Chloe, who was initially wary. Trust fund babies are nothing but trouble, Ava, had to admit that he seemed like the real deal. My mom, who was always so protective of me, after seeing how hard I'd had to fight for everything, warmed up to him when he spent a whole weekend helping her rebuild her garden shed, no complaints. In those first 18 months, I only got small glimpses into Liam's world. I'd met his parents once briefly at some fancy charity gala. They were polite, but there was a definite chill in the air. His friends were a mixed bag. Some were great, but others were clearly sizing me up, trying to figure out where I fit in based on my family tree or lack thereof. Liam was always my champion, though. He once walked us out of a party on a yacht because some jerk made a condescending comment about my quaint little career. That's why I was so blindsided. How could I have seen it coming? This was the man who had held me while I mourned my grandmother, who had cheered for every single one of my professional victories, who spoke about our future with such unwavering conviction. So when he got down on one knee during a sunset hike at Angel's Rest, my favorite viewpoint overlooking the Columbia River Gorge, I said yes, without a moment's hesitation. The ring was absolutely perfect. It was a vintage-inspired emerald-cut diamond that was so perfectly my style, not some giant flashy rock that would have looked ridiculous on my hand. As he put it on my finger, Liam whispered, "I just don't want to be me without you anymore." We celebrated back at our apartment with takeout and champagne, calling my mom, who was sobbing with happiness, and then meeting up with Chloe and my coworkers for celebratory drinks. It all felt so right, so perfect, like it was all meant to be. A week later, Liam brought up the idea of a formal engagement dinner with his family. "They really want to welcome you into the family the right way," he said, kissing my forehead. "They're so excited for you to be a part of things." I was a bundle of nerves, but I was also ecstatic. I genuinely believed that our love was strong enough to bridge the gap between our two different worlds. I spent hours daydreaming about finally officially becoming a part of his family, completely oblivious to what that night would truly unveil. The panic started to creep in about 2 weeks before the dinner. What in the world was I going to wear? My usual uniform of jeans and nice tops wasn't going to fly at the Sterling estate. Chloe, my partner in crime, came with me on a shopping mission, but my recent student loan payment meant our budget was tight. "How about this one?" Chloe suggested, holding up a classic navy cocktail dress at Nordstrom. "Too plain." I sighed, picturing Liam's mother dripping in pearls and custom-made designer clothes. We finally struck gold with a forest green midi dress we found on the sale rack. It was sophisticated and chic, and it didn't completely drain my bank account. When I modeled it for Liam that night, his smile was a little stiff. "It's nice," he said, a slight hesitation in his voice. "But you know, Mom mentioned that it's going to be a pretty formal affair." The next day, a text from him popped up with a link to a stunning black designer gown that cost more than my rent for 3 months. "My treat," he'd added, along with a heart emoji. I politely turned him down, telling him I'd already found the perfect dress. His reply, "I just want you to feel like you fit in with everyone," left a strange knot in my stomach, but I brushed it off. In the week leading up to the dinner, I went into full-on prep mode. I was determined to make a good impression, so I binge-watched YouTube tutorials on high society dining etiquette, trying to memorize which fork was for what, and what topics of conversation were considered appropriate. I even rehearsed answers to potential questions about my background. Just be you, Chloe told me over coffee. If they can't handle that, it's their problem, not yours. They're just being protective of Liam, I argued, trying to convince myself as much as her. Once they get to know me, they'll see how happy we are. Liam kept telling me the same thing. They're going to love you almost as much as I do. But I couldn't help but notice how antsy he'd gotten, constantly checking his phone for texts from his mother about the dinner plans. The night of the dinner, a surprise April shower started to fall. I had taken my time getting ready, styling my hair in soft waves and doing my makeup with extra care. My green dress looked perfect, with the simple pearl earrings that had been my grandmother's. When I walked out of the bathroom, Liam let out a low whistle. "You look incredible," he said, but then his eyes flickered to his watch. "We should probably get going. Dad can't stand it when people are late." The Sterling estate was perched on 5 perfectly landscaped acres in the West Hills. The sprawling Tudor-style mansion made my childhood home look like a Polly Pocket house. My stomach did a nervous flip as we drove through the massive wrought iron gates. The rain drummed a soft rhythm on the windshield as Liam parked his Audi in a line of other high-end cars. "Ready?" he asked, giving my hand a quick squeeze before his expression tightened into a more formal public mask that I hardly ever saw. The huge front door swung open before we even had a chance to ring the bell. Victoria Sterling stood there, a vision in a black cocktail dress and a galaxy of diamonds. Her smile was a well-rehearsed chilly thing that never reached her eyes. "Darling, you made it. Everyone is waiting," she said, air-kissing Liam's cheeks. Her eyes then scanned over me, taking in every detail. "Ava, welcome." There was no hug, no warmth, just a cold clinical appraisal. Lawrence Sterling emerged from the foyer, a glass of amber liquid swirling in his hand. He was tall like Liam, but there was a hardness to him, his edges unsoftened by kindness. "Ah, the happy couple," he boomed, clapping Liam on the back. He then offered me a brief, firm handshake. "Congratulations are in order, I suppose." Not a word about welcoming me to the family, not a hint of joy for his son's happiness. Liam's siblings, Madison and Tyler, appeared next. Madison, a sleek blonde replica of her mother, gave me a practiced smile. Tyler at least made an effort to be friendly, grumbling about the nightmare traffic coming from downtown. As we moved into the formal living room for cocktails, I noticed Liam starting to pull away from me both physically and emotionally. He was deep in a business conversation with his father while Madison started grilling me about my cute little design job. "It's so charming that you're the creative type," she said, swirling a glass of what I was sure was very expensive scotch. "Is there really a market for, what did you call it again, graphics?" "Graphic design," I corrected her, keeping my voice even. "And yes, there is. Every brand needs a visual identity. In fact, I just spearheaded a campaign for Meridian Athletics that boosted their quarterly sales by 22%. "How industrious," Victoria chimed in, suddenly appearing at my side. "Liam mentioned you work quite a bit. I'm sure that will all change once you're married." The implication was like a slap in the face. "Actually, I'm very passionate about my career. I have no intention of giving it up." A thick, uncomfortable silence hung in the air until Lawrence announced that dinner was served. The formal dining room was straight out of a movie set with a massive crystal chandelier, antique silverware, and a table that could have seated a small army, though there were only 7 of us. I was placed between Madison and Liam's Aunt Patricia, with Liam seated across the table and 4 chairs down next to his mother. The distance between us felt intentional, making any kind of natural conversation impossible. "Liam tells us you went to Portland State," Lawrence said as the servers brought out the first course. "An interesting choice." The unspoken criticism hung in the air. Why not a top-tier private university? "I was on a scholarship," I explained, "and their design program is actually one of the best in the industry." "Really?" Patricia asked, her surprise seeming genuine. "I've always been a firm believer in the power of networking at the right schools. Both of my children went to Yale, you know." The conversation then veered into a tour of a world I'd only read about: elite universities I hadn't attended, summer homes I'd never set foot in, and a cast of characters whose last names were apparently all that mattered. I felt myself becoming more and more of an outsider with each passing moment. "Remember that Christmas in Aspen, Liam?" Madison asked. "Those private ski lessons were worth every single penny." Liam just nodded, his eyes fixed on his plate. They really were. Just last Christmas, we had been at my mom's cozy little house where he had sworn he loved our simple homemade traditions. Lawrence then steered the conversation towards my family, asking pointed questions about my parents' careers and social standing. "My mother is a middle school English teacher," I said, my voice filled with pride. "She's dedicated her entire life to education." "How noble," Victoria said, her tone dripping with condescension. "And your father?" The question I always dreaded. "He wasn't really in the picture." "I see." Lawrence and his wife exchanged a knowing look. "Liam mentioned you were from the East Side." The dinner was a minefield of uncomfortable topics: family trusts, country club memberships, and not-so-subtle mentions of Liam's ex-girlfriend Charlotte, who apparently came from the right kind of family and just got their world. And through it all, Liam was a ghost. He either stayed completely silent or would quickly change the subject instead of defending me. When I tried to talk about my recent promotion, he cut me off with some random story from his college days, completely dismissing my accomplishment. The Liam I knew and loved was fading away, replaced by a stranger who was desperately trying to please his family. The excitement I'd felt about joining this family had curdled into a growing sense of dread and doubt. As the servers cleared our plates, Lawrence honed in on me, swirling his wine glass. "So Ava, tell me more about this graphic design career of yours. Is it a rewarding little hobby?" The word hobby lit a fire in my cheeks. "It's not a hobby, Mr. Sterling. I'm a senior designer, and I manage campaigns for national brands." "How quaint," he said, his tone making it clear he was not impressed. "And what does one make in a field like that enough to get by?" Before I could even answer, Liam let out a strained laugh. "Dad, come on, let's not talk about money at the dinner table." "Nonsense," Lawrence shot back. "We're all family here, or we will be soon enough. These are important practical matters." He turned his icy gaze back to me. "I'm told that an entry-level designer makes what, $40,000 a year. That's hardly enough to support the kind of lifestyle Liam is used to." My salary was actually quite a bit higher than that, especially after my promotion, but that wasn't the point. He was making it crystal clear that whatever I earned was pocket change in the Sterling universe. "I am fully capable of supporting myself," I said, my voice firm. "I have never expected Liam to finance my life." Victoria's laugh was like the sound of shattering glass. "Oh, darling, that's adorable, but let's be realistic. The social commitments alone that come with being a Sterling would make it impossible for you to keep up with your professional life." "I have no intention of quitting my job," I said, my eyes pleading with Liam to back me up. He just stared at his plate. "Ava does incredible work, but we haven't really talked about long-term career goals after we're married." His words were a physical blow. We had talked about it endlessly. He had always been my biggest cheerleader. Lawrence nodded at his son, a look of approval on his face. "A wise man. The Sterling legacy demands certain adjustments. My wife understood that when we got married." "Dad, times have changed," Liam said, his voice barely a whisper. "Some things never change," Lawrence retorted. "Family always comes first." Victoria smoothly changed the subject. "Speaking of family traditions, we really should discuss the prenuptial agreement. Our family lawyer has already drafted a standard version." The casual way she dropped the word prenup into the conversation, as if I wasn't even there, sent a shiver down my spine. It wasn't that I was against the idea of a prenup. I understood the need to protect generational wealth. But it was the fact that Liam had never once brought it up with me in private. "We can talk about that some other time," Liam mumbled, finally looking uncomfortable. "Don't be silly," Lawrence said, waving his hand dismissively. "Ava is a smart girl. She understands how these things work, don't you? The Sterling assets are complex. There are several trusts, real estate holdings, the car dealerships. It's just standard procedure." "Of course," I choked out, my appetite completely gone. Madison leaned in, topping off her wine glass. "Remember Charlotte's family? They were so understanding about the whole thing. Her father is a partner at Wilson and Crane, you know." Liam shifted in his seat. "Madison, that has nothing to do with this." "I'm just saying." Madison pushed on. It's so much easier when people come from similar backgrounds. The conversation then devolved into a highlight reel of Liam's relationship with Charlotte Wellington, a woman I'd only heard about in passing. Apparently, they had been together for 3 years and had only broken up a few months before Liam and I met. The Wellingtons were heartbroken, Victoria said wistfully. They had practically started planning the wedding. She was such a perfect match for him. Every word was a dagger reminding me of all the ways I didn't measure up of a history that Liam had conveniently downplayed. As the night wore on, all the little red flags I had ignored started to make sense. Liam's hesitation to introduce me to certain friends, his vague excuses for why I wasn't invited to certain family functions, his helpful critiques of my wardrobe. The wine was flowing freely, and with it any semblance of decorum. Lawrence was holding court pontificating about the Sterling legacy, the expectations for the next generation, and the importance of maintaining certain standards. Liam will be heading up the Northeast expansion next year, Lawrence announced. It will mean relocating to Boston, of course. The news hit me like a ton of bricks. We had talked about potential career moves, but Boston, a definite relocation. He had never mentioned any of this. My job, my friends, my mom. My entire life was in Portland. I looked at Liam, but he was staring intently at his wine glass, as if it held all the answers to the universe. Another crack formed in my already breaking heart. As the servers brought out the main course, the family slipped into a comfortable rhythm that left me completely on the outside. They shared inside jokes I didn't get, talked about people I'd never met, and reminisced about memories I wasn't a part of. Liam was physically leaning away from me towards his mother, creating a chasm between us. The Wellington fundraiser is next month, Victoria said casually. Charlotte specifically asked if you would be there, Liam. I'll have to check my schedule, he said, not even glancing in my direction. Tyler, who had been mostly quiet, made a feeble attempt to include me. Ava, did Liam tell you about the new vineyard we're buying? It's a prime spot in the Willamette Valley. Before I could even form a response, Victoria cut in. I was just talking to Elise Harrington about the wedding. A June ceremony at the Riverside Country Club would be absolutely perfect. We haven't actually set a date, I said, my voice tight, or a venue. She just steamrolled over me as if I hadn't spoken at all. The guest list is already up to 300, mostly family friends and important business contacts. I nearly choked on my water. Liam and I had talked about a small, intimate wedding with maybe 50 of our closest friends and family. The wedding Victoria was describing was a production, a business transaction, not a celebration of our love. The Harringtons' daughter had a 12-piece orchestra, Lawrence added. It was a magnificent affair. I felt a wave of nausea as the reality of the situation crashed down on me. They weren't planning our wedding. They were planning a Sterling-approved spectacle. And the worst part, Liam was just sitting there letting it all happen. He didn't correct them. He didn't defend our plans. He didn't even look at me. I tried to hold my head high to maintain some semblance of dignity, but I felt myself shrinking with every passing second. Every time I tried to contribute to the conversation, to talk about my life, my interests, my world, the subject was quickly changed to something that only served to highlight how much I didn't belong. Lawrence kept making snide remarks about family standards. Madison couldn't stop talking about Charlotte's social connections. Victoria was planning my wedding without me, and Liam, the man who had sworn to be my partner, my equal, was a silent accomplice. A delicate chocolate soufflé was placed in front of each of us as Lawrence swirled the last of the cognac in his snifter. The entire evening had been a test of my endurance, and I was failing miserably. Every minute felt like an hour as I desperately wished for it all to be over. Well, Lawrence said, his voice laced with a smug, self-satisfied tone that made my skin crawl. I think it's high time we address the elephant in the room. A hush fell over the table. Even the clinking of silverware stopped. Lawrence fixed his sharp, calculating eyes on me. Ava, I've always been a man who appreciates directness. The Sterling family has spent generations building an empire. It is not only my right, but my duty to understand your intentions with my son. My heart started to pound against my ribs. My intentions. Precisely. He set his glass down with a decisive thud. Liam is more than just a charming young man. He represents a significant financial future. A young woman from your circumstances suddenly appearing in his life does raise certain, let's say, questions. The insinuation was as thick as the tension in the room. "Dad," Liam finally managed to say, but his voice was weak, lacking any real conviction. Lawrence held up a hand, silencing him. "Someone has to be blunt here. The timing of it all is curious. Liam is on the cusp of a major promotion. His trust fund matures when he turns 30, and then poof, you appear." My hands were shaking under the table. "Mr. Sterling, I love your son. I am not interested in his money or his status." Lawrence let out a short, sharp laugh. "That's what they all say, my dear. But let's be frank. What exactly do you bring to this union? Besides a sob story about a girl from the wrong side of the tracks who managed to snag a wealthy husband." The temperature in the room seemed to plummet. "Dad, that's not fair," Liam mumbled. "Isn't it?" Lawrence shot back. "Look at the facts. No family connections to speak of, no significant personal assets, a career that, while I'm sure is very creative, is hardly on par with the opportunities our family can provide. Let's just call a spade a spade." He leaned in, his eyes boring into mine. "You're a gold digger. A very clever one, I'll give you that, but a gold digger nonetheless." The silence that followed was absolute. The accusation, so ugly and so cruel, just hung there in the air. I looked at Liam, my heart pleading with him to say something, to fight for me, to tell his father how wrong he was. But he didn't. Instead, he laughed. It wasn't a nervous, uncomfortable laugh. It was a genuine laugh, a laugh of agreement. He looked at his father, a flicker of approval in his eyes, and then he added, "She does have a habit of ordering the most expensive wine on the menu." My blood ran cold. It felt as if time had slowed down, every detail of the moment seared into my brain. The man I was going to marry, the man who had promised to be my partner in all things, hadn't just stood by and let his father tear me to shreds. He had joined in. And in that one blindingly clear moment, all the little betrayals, all the subtle digs, all the times I had felt like I wasn't quite good enough, all of it clicked into place. Liam had never really seen me as his equal. I was a novelty, a fun little detour from his world, but he had always expected me to eventually shed my skin and become one of them on their terms. The engagement ring on my finger suddenly felt like a lead weight, a shackle. The 2-carat diamond that had once been a symbol of our future was now a glaring reminder of how completely he had misunderstood who I was and what I stood for. With a strange, surreal calmness, I slipped the ring off my finger. The movement caught everyone's attention. The soft clink it made as I placed it on the table next to Liam's plate was as loud as a gunshot in the silent room. "Ava," Liam started, the reality of what was happening finally dawning on him. I stood up, my movements slow and deliberate. I placed my napkin neatly on the table next to my untouched dessert. My legs felt like they belonged to someone else. As I pushed my chair back, the sound of it scraping against the hardwood floor echoing through the tense silence. Every eye in the room was on me as I squared my shoulders, picked up my small clutch, and turned to leave, my head held high. Every step I took towards the dining room door was a drumbeat, my heart pounding in my ears. But a strange sense of peace had washed over me, guiding me through the foyer and towards the front door. I heard a chair scrape behind me, and I knew it was Liam, but I didn't stop. "A dramatic exit won't change the facts, my dear," Lawrence's voice sneered from down the hall. Liam caught up to me just as I reached for the doorknob. "Ava, wait. Dad was just drunk. He didn't mean any of that." I turned to face him, a newfound strength in my silence. His face, the face I had woken up next to for 2 years, the face I had thought I would spend the rest of my life with, was now the face of a stranger. "Ava, please, just let me drive you home. We can talk this through." I just shook my head, opened the heavy door, and walked out into the cool night air. The door clicked shut behind me, a sound of quiet finality. The rain had stopped and the world felt clean and new. A few stars were starting to peek through the clouds. With every step I took towards my car, I was walking further away from a life that I had thought I wanted, but now knew I could never have. Once I was safely inside my car, my hands steady on the wheel, I took my first deep, clean breath in hours. The tears would come, I knew that, a whole flood of them. But in that moment, all I felt was a strange, liberating lightness. The weight of the ring was gone from my hand, and the weight of a future that was never truly mine was gone from my shoulders. I started the engine and drove away from the Sterling estate, and I didn't look back. The 20-minute drive back to my apartment was a blur of streetlights and silent roads. I was so grateful that I had kept my own place after we moved in together. I kicked off my heels and just sat on the floor of my living room in the dark, my back pressed against the couch. My phone started to buzz over and over again. Liam, 7 missed calls, 12 text messages. Please call me. Dad was completely out of line. You know I don't really think that. It was a stupid joke. Where are you? I'm on my way over. We need to talk about this. You're overreacting. That last one was the one that did it. The dam broke, and the tears started to fall. The humiliation, the betrayal, the crushing realization that the future I had been so excited about was built on a foundation of lies. I sent a quick text to Chloe. Engagement dinner was a complete and utter disaster. I need you. She was at my door in 20 minutes, a bottle of wine in one hand, and a look of fierce determination on her face. I told her everything, the whole sordid story punctuated by sobs and the occasional hysterical laugh at the sheer absurdity of it all. That absolute bastard, Chloe seethed, pouring us both very generous glasses of wine. Both of them. I just can't get that laugh out of my head. I said, my voice hoarse. It was like they were sharing some kind of sick private joke at my expense. That's because they were, Chloe said, her voice sharp. Guys like Liam love to play the rebel by dating a normal girl, but at the end of the day they expect you to morph into a carbon copy of their mother. My phone kept buzzing. Liam's texts were getting more and more frantic. Please just talk to me. I'm outside your apartment. I know you're in there, I can see your car. Just give me 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking for. Chloe took my phone, her fingers flying across the screen. She handed it back to me for approval. Not tonight. I need some space. I hit send and then silenced my phone. Chloe and I spent the rest of the night purging my apartment of all things Liam. It was a surprisingly quick job. For someone who had been in my life for 2 years, he had left a remarkably small footprint on my personal space. Lying in bed that night alone, I replayed our entire relationship in my head from the very beginning. The signs had been there all along, I just hadn't wanted to see them. The way Liam would talk about my creativity to his colleagues, as if he had to translate my career into a language they could understand. The look of surprise on his face when I would hold my own in a conversation about economics or politics, revealing his own deep-seated assumptions. The way he would always insist on paying for everything which I had always thought was generous, but now realized was a subtle way of keeping me dependent on him. The next morning there was a loud pounding on my door. It was Liam. He looked like he hadn't slept at all. His clothes were rumpled, his eyes were bloodshot, and he was holding a ridiculously large bouquet of roses. 5 minutes, he begged. That's all I'm asking. Against my better judgment, I let him in, making sure to keep a safe distance between us, as he set the flowers down on my counter. I am so sorry, he started. My dad was drunk, he was completely out of line. I should have shut him down right away. But you didn't, I said, my voice calm and steady. You laughed. It was a nervous laugh. It was an uncomfortable situation, and I didn't know how to react. I just shook my head. No, Liam, I know the difference between a nervous laugh and what you did. You agreed with him. That's not true. He was getting desperate now. The wine comment, it was just a stupid joke. I was trying to de-escalate the situation by throwing me to the wolves. He ran a hand through his hair, his frustration mounting. You don't get it. You don't understand the kind of pressure I'm under in those situations. Sometimes it's just easier to go along with it for a minute than to make a big scene. Make a scene. My voice was still quiet, but there was a new edge to it. Standing up for the woman you claim you want to spend the rest of your life with isn't making a scene. It's the absolute bare minimum. I'll talk to them, he promised. I'll fix this. I'll make my dad apologize. This isn't about your father apologizing, this is about you. Liam started pacing my tiny living room. What do you want from me? You want me to say I messed up? Fine. I messed up. I made one mistake. One mistake in 2 years, and you're just going to throw it all away. His words ignited a slow-burning anger that had been simmering just beneath the surface. One mistake, Liam? You sat there and let your entire family take a wrecking ball to every single aspect of my life, my background, my career, my character. You let them plan a wedding that had absolutely nothing to do with us. You never told me about Boston or a prenup or any of the other plans you've apparently been making for our future. We can figure all that stuff out, he insisted. Those are just details. They are not details. They are the very foundation of who we are and what we want from our lives. And what last night proved to me is that what you want isn't me. It's some sanitized Sterling-approved version of me. His expression hardened, the contrition replaced by a flash of frustration. You're not being fair. I chose you, didn't I, against all of their expectations? Chose me. I repeated the words, tasting like ash in my mouth. Like I should be grateful. And that right there is the entire problem, Liam. You think you were doing me some kind of favor by being with me. That's not what I meant. He looked genuinely pained. I love you for who you are. No, I said, my voice quiet but firm. You love the idea of me. You love the creative, independent woman who's a little different from the girls you usually date. But you don't actually respect that independence when it gets in the way of what your world demands. Liam sank to his knees in front of me, taking my hands in his. I will prove you wrong. I will stand up to them. I will do whatever it takes. I looked into his eyes, the eyes I knew so well, and all I felt was a profound sadness. Even if you did all that now, I would always know that it wasn't your first instinct. Your first instinct was to laugh. After Liam finally left his empty promises to fix everything, still hanging in the air, the Sterling family launched their counteroffensive. Victoria was the first to strike, showing up unannounced at my office 3 days later. The entire office stopped and stared as the impeccably dressed woman asked for me at the front desk. My boss, Jessica, gave me a questioning look as I led Victoria into our small conference room. This has gone on long enough, she began without any preamble. Liam is an absolute wreck. I'm sorry to hear that. She waved a dismissive, perfectly manicured hand. Misunderstandings are bound to happen in families. Lawrence can be a bit blunt, but his only concern is protecting his family. Calling someone a gold digger isn't blunt, Mrs. Sterling. It's cruel and it's a lie. She let out an exasperated sigh as if I was being deliberately difficult. Perhaps it was poorly phrased, but the fact remains, marriage is about more than just love. It's about compatible backgrounds, shared values, and understanding your role in the family. And that is precisely why I gave back the ring. For the first time, Victoria's polished facade started to crack. Liam has a future ahead of him that you can't even begin to comprehend. He needs a partner who will be an asset to him, not a liability. Then I suggest he finds one, I said, my voice even, because it's not me. She left with a parting shot about how she had hoped I would be more reasonable. Lawrence's attempt at reconciliation came in the form of a cold, businesslike email. He laid out a set of terms for my return, which included a cushy position at the Sterling Foundation that would allow me to pursue my creative interests while still maintaining an appropriate social calendar. The audacity of the bribe was more insulting than his original accusation. Surprisingly, Madison was the next to reach out, inviting me for coffee. Unlike her parents, she actually seemed to be capable of self-reflection. I was a complete bitch that night, she admitted, stirring her latte. But I just wanted you to know Liam has been fighting with my dad non-stop since you left. I have never ever seen him stand up to him like this. It's a little too late, I said, though her words did give me a moment of pause. Maybe, she conceded, but it's still growth. The most insightful conversation I had was with Tyler, who had the decency to call me instead of staging an ambush. Liam's a mess, he started. But I'm not calling to make you feel guilty. I just wanted to say, I get it. What my dad said was completely out of line. Thank you, I appreciate you saying that. Here's the thing you might not get, though, Tyler went on. We were all raised under this insane pressure to be perfect. Liam, he's the golden boy, the heir to the throne. His entire life has been about making my dad happy. That doesn't make what he did okay. No, Tyler agreed. It doesn't. But breaking that cycle of constantly seeking approval, it's not as easy as it sounds. Trust me, I know. The conversation gave me a lot to think about, but it didn't change my mind. I sent Liam one last message spelling out exactly why his actions were unacceptable, and making it clear that respect was a non-negotiable in any relationship I was in. He sent back a novel-length response full of promises to change, to fight for me to be the man I deserved. But he still didn't get it. He was so focused on fixing the problem that he wasn't willing to look at the root cause. I didn't write back. The first month after the breakup was like recovering from a major surgery. It was painful, but I knew it was necessary for my healing. I walked around in a daze, going through the motions at work, but feeling completely numb inside. The nights were the worst, lying awake, replaying every moment of that horrible dinner, second-guessing myself. On Chloe's advice, I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Langley, who helped me see the patterns I had been blind to. "What you're describing is a classic case of emotional manipulation," she told me in our third session. "The expectation that you should feel lucky to be with him, the subtle ways he undermined your independence, the way he kept you separate from his real life while expecting you to welcome him into every corner of yours." "But I know he loved me," I insisted, the loss still a raw, open wound. "I'm sure he did," she said gently, "but love without respect isn't a partnership, it's ownership." Her words were a revelation, shining a light on so many interactions I had tried to explain away. Liam's helpful suggestions about how I should dress before meeting his friends, his patronizing tone when I would voice my concerns about not fitting in, his unspoken assumption that my career would always take a back seat to his. I started to reconnect with friends I had let drift away during my relationship with Liam. My college roommate Tasha came to visit for a weekend, and she brought a much-needed dose of reality. "Remember when you passed on that amazing internship in Chicago because Liam said long distance would be too hard?" she asked me. That wasn't the Ava I know. The Ava I know would never let a man clip her wings. My mom, as always, was my rock. When I finally told her the whole story, she drove up from Portland with a huge pot of her homemade chicken soup and a bottomless supply of unconditional love. "I am so incredibly proud of you," she said, which completely took me by surprise. It takes a hell of a lot of courage to walk away from something that looks so perfect on the outside, but is so wrong on the inside. "I just feel like such a failure," I confessed. "No," she said, her voice firm. "You succeeded at the most important thing of all. You honored your own worth." She then told me stories I had never heard before about her own marriage to my father, about how she had ignored so many red flags because she was so desperate for the relationship to work, about how she had made herself smaller and smaller to try and fit into his world. "The hardest thing I ever had to learn," she told me, "is that you should never have to shrink yourself to make someone else love you. Real love gives you the space to grow." My work became my refuge. The creative challenges of my job were a welcome distraction, a way to channel my pain into something positive. Jessica, my boss, gave me the lead on a huge new campaign for an eco-friendly clothing brand, knowing that I needed something to pour my energy into. The project was a huge success, and it got a lot of attention in the industry. It also led to an unexpected opportunity. I was being considered for the new creative director position at our agency. It was a huge step up with more responsibility, more creative freedom, and a much bigger paycheck. Before the engagement dinner from hell, I would have hesitated, worried about how such a demanding job would affect my relationship. But now I went for it with everything I had. "Your vision for the future of the creative department is brilliant," Jessica told me after my final interview. "I have never seen you so focused, so confident." And she was right. Without the constant low-grade anxiety of trying to live up to Liam's expectations, my creative instincts were sharper than ever. I was taking more risks, my ideas were flowing more freely, and my presentations were more authentic. I was no longer second-guessing myself, no longer trying to tone down my ideas, to make them more palatable for the sterling world I had been so desperate to be a part of. Liam's attempts to win me back started to fizzle out. The flowers stopped coming, the handwritten letters became less frequent. I heard through mutual friends that he was actually making some changes. He was standing up to his father at work. He was skipping out on some of the stuffy family events. He was even seeing a therapist. A small part of me wanted to believe that he could really change, but a much larger part of me knew that the damage was done. You can't just glue a shattered plate back together and expect it to be as good as new. It was impossible to completely avoid him on social media. Even though I had unfriended him, we had too many mutual friends, and his life would occasionally pop up on my feed. Pictures of him at charity galas, announcements about the Sterling family's business ventures, and then the one that stung the most, a picture of him at a gallery opening with Charlotte Wellington, her hand resting casually on his arm. But to my surprise, the pain was more of a dull ache than a sharp stab. It was like remembering an old injury, not a fresh wound. 3 months after I gave Liam back his ring, I joined a local designer collective. We met once a month to brainstorm, share ideas, and support each other's work. Being a part of that community of independent creative women was exactly what I needed. It was a space where I was valued for my talent and my ideas, not my connections or my last name. It was through the collective that I met Angela, a brilliant UX designer who quickly became my mentor and my friend. She had been in the industry for 15 years, and her perspective was invaluable, especially as I was trying to decide whether to take the creative director job or to strike out on my own. Sometimes the biggest doors open up after you walk away from what feels safe, she told me over coffee one day. What would you do if you weren't afraid of making the wrong choice? Her question hit me hard. How many times had I held myself back because I was afraid? How much had I unconsciously limited my own ambitions to keep the peace in my relationship? I started journaling, pouring all my thoughts and feelings onto the page. Every night I would write about my small victories, my unexpected moments of joy, and my painful realizations. Reading back through my entries, I could see a clear transformation. The early entries were filled with raw pain and self-doubt. Did I just throw away the best thing that ever happened to me? Am I going to regret this forever? But the later entries were filled with a growing sense of clarity and self-assurance. I realize today that I haven't apologized for having an opinion all week. That's progress. I presented my ideas today without watering them down. The client loved it. I thought about the way Liam laughed at his father's comment today, and for the first time I didn't feel pain. I felt gratitude. Gratitude that he showed me his true colors before I married into that family. 6 months after that disastrous dinner, I was more than just surviving. I was thriving. I had gotten the creative director job. I had redecorated my apartment to reflect my own taste with no compromises. My weekends were filled with things I loved: hiking with Chloe, taking art classes, and volunteering at the local literacy center, something my mom had always encouraged me to do. Liam was still a part of my world, but he was on the periphery now. He no longer had the power to dominate my thoughts or my emotions. When a mutual friend would bring him up, I could listen without feeling that familiar pang of regret. His name was just a name now, not a trigger. I knew that this was what true healing felt like. It wasn't the absence of pain, but the transformation of that pain into something powerful. Every tear I had cried, every sleepless night, every time I had stood my ground, it had all been worth it. I had built something precious and unshakable: self-trust. 8 months after I walked out of that mansion, I signed a lease on a beautiful, sun-drenched apartment overlooking the river. It was more expensive than my old place, but with my new salary, I could comfortably afford it. Moving day felt like a celebration. Chloe, Tasha, and some of my friends from work helped me haul boxes and furniture, and we christened the new space with takeout and champagne. To new beginnings. Chloe toasted our glasses, clinking as the setting sun filled my new living room with a warm, golden light. This apartment was more than just a new address. It was a symbol of my independence. Every piece of furniture, every piece of art on the walls was something I had chosen for myself. There were no compromises, no mental gymnastics about what would impress my future in-laws, no trying to fit into a mold that was never meant for me. My relationship with my mom grew even stronger during this time. Our weekly phone calls became deep, meaningful conversations, not just surface-level updates. She started visiting more often, and I made more trips down to Portland. We were finally building the kind of adult friendship that we had never quite managed to have before. "You remind me so much of my own mother," she told me during one of her visits, which caught me completely off guard. She had this incredible, unshakable sense of who she was, even when the world was trying to tell her to be someone else. I see that same strength in you now. Her words meant the world to me. My grandmother had always been my hero, a woman who had opened her own bookstore in the 1960s, defying everyone's expectations that she should be content with just being a wife and a mother. My career continued to flourish. As the new creative director, I was able to build a team that reflected my own values, diverse, collaborative, and committed to excellence without the ego. The most exciting development, however, came from my designers collective. A casual conversation about freelance work morphed into a full-blown business proposal. Several of us decided to pool our talents and launch our own boutique agency specializing in sustainable and socially conscious brands. It was a huge leap of faith, but it felt so right. It was inevitable that Liam and I would cross paths again. The creative scene in our city just wasn't big enough for us to avoid each other forever. It happened at the annual Advertising Association Gala. I was there representing my agency, feeling confident and powerful in a vibrant blue jumpsuit that was a bold statement of my new, unapologetic style. I saw him across the room standing with a group of colleagues. He stopped mid-sentence when he saw me. 6 months had changed him too. He had a new haircut, he'd lost a little weight, and there was something different about the way he carried himself. "Ava," he said, walking towards me cautiously, "you look amazing." "Thanks, Liam. How have you been?" The simple question felt heavy with all the things we had left unsaid. This man who had once been my entire future was now practically a stranger. "Good, better," he said with a slight hesitation. "The Boston expansion is still happening, but I'm not leading it anymore." Oh, I was genuinely surprised. I finally realized that I was living my father's life, not my own. He offered a small, sad smile. "Some lessons have a pretty high price tag." Our conversation was brief, polite, and tinged with a mutual acknowledgement of everything we had lost and everything we had perhaps gained. As we were saying our goodbyes, Liam said something that has stayed with me ever since. "You deserved so much better. That night and every other night that I failed to be the partner you deserved." There were no excuses, no last-ditch efforts to win me back. Just a simple, honest admission of the truth. Walking away from him that night, I felt the last piece of my healing click into place. The anger that had been simmering just beneath the surface for so long was finally gone, replaced by a quiet acceptance that everything had happened exactly as it was supposed to. The journey from that humiliating dinner to this place of peace and strength hadn't been a straight line. Therapy had helped me to see the ways in which my own past had made me vulnerable. My desperate need to prove my worth, my tendency to be a people-pleaser, my fear that speaking up for myself would make me seem difficult. Dr. Langley had helped me to understand why his father's accusation had cut so deep. It had played on all my own insecurities about our class differences, insecurities I hadn't even realized I had. "The most powerful part of your story," she had told me, "wasn't walking out of that dinner. It was choosing not to go back, even when it would have been easier." She was right. Every time I had ignored Liam's pleas to come back, I had been choosing myself. Every professional victory I had celebrated, without worrying about how it would make someone else feel, had been a step towards rebuilding my confidence. My friendship with Madison Sterling was another unexpected gift. We started meeting for coffee every now and then, and her insights into what it was like to grow up under Lawrence's thumb helped me to understand Liam's behavior without excusing it. "We were raised to believe that what things look like on the outside is more important than how they actually feel on the inside," she told me. "Liam is trying to unlearn all of that. You leaving was the wake-up call he needed." "I couldn't be the one to fix him," I said. "I know," she said, her voice soft. "That's why it's actually working." 10 months after that fateful night, I started dating again. His name is Ethan, and he's a commercial photographer I had worked with on a few campaigns. Our relationship grew slowly, organically, from a place of mutual respect and friendship. The difference between being with Ethan and being with Liam was like night and day. Ethan was genuinely interested in my work. He valued my opinion, and he never once made me feel like my background or my career was something to be ashamed of. And most importantly, I went into this relationship with a clear set of boundaries and a strong sense of who I was. No more making myself smaller to make someone else feel bigger. No more being afraid to speak my mind. No more settling for less than I deserved. When Ethan met my mom, they hit it off immediately. He saw her as a person worth getting to know, not as an obligation to be tolerated. My career continued to soar. The boutique agency I started with my friends was a huge success. Leaving the security of my creative director job had been terrifying, but my mom was right. Sometimes the greatest rewards come from taking the biggest risks. Our first major client was an innovative, sustainable fashion brand, and the campaign we created for them won several industry awards. But more importantly, it was work that I was proud of, work that aligned with my values. Looking back on the journey that started with that humiliating dinner, I can see the gift that was hidden in all that pain. If Liam had defended me that night, if we had somehow managed to patch things up, I would have spent the rest of my life trying to contort myself into someone who could fit into the Sterling family mold. The real betrayal wasn't when Lawrence called me a gold digger and Liam laughed. The real betrayal had been much more insidious. It was the unspoken expectation that I would eventually erase myself to become the person they wanted me to be. Walking away wasn't just about leaving a man who had failed me. It was about choosing not to abandon myself. Every step I have taken since that night, rebuilding my career, nurturing my friendships, creating a life that is authentically mine, and opening my heart to a new kind of love has been a testament to that first brave act of self-respect. The biggest lesson I learned wasn't about red flags or class differences, or even about the importance of standing up for yourself. It was the quiet, powerful understanding that when you have to sacrifice your essential self to be in a relationship, it's not a compromise, it's a slow and painful erasure. A true partnership, whether it's in love, in friendship, or in business, doesn't ask you to shrink. It gives you the space to grow. The dignity and respect I demanded that night weren't luxuries. They were the absolute non-negotiable currency of any relationship worth having. As I stand here today building a business that I am passionate about, surrounded by people who lift me up, I am grateful for the painful clarity of that night. Sometimes the things we lose are the things that set us free. Have you ever had to walk away from a situation that looked perfect on the outside, but was eating you alive on the inside? Share your story in the comments below. You never know who might need to hear it today to find the courage to make their own escape. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button if my story resonated with you. Thank you for listening, and always remember, your worth is never ever up for negotiation.